is that we're literally begging for these things. Those of us who are autistic, we're begging for euthanasia. Many of us. You won't allow us a place in your society. One thing we can't do with all of these bullheaded little tweezle nuts this day and age. We can't force them to care about somebody other than themselves. We can't force people in the LGBT community to care about autistic people. Autism Speaks. I hear them advertised everywhere. Do not listen to Autism Speaks. They hurt us. They hurt us. These are parents hateful because they have demon children. These aren't demon children. The more they exhibit signs of trauma and abuse, the more you traumatize and abuse us. Us. All of us. You traumatize and abuse your children who are autistic. You treat them in a way that you would not want to be treated yourself. Low-functioning autistic children. You incite them into a traumatic defensive reaction. So let's tell you about the American doubletap and Sean with the mohawk on Pearl Street. We're going to back up to 2003. 2 decades ago, 20 years ago. What was going on at the time? Well, at that point in time, I was homeless in Boulder, Colorado. I'd left Chapel, Nebraska because all my friends there, like Chris Stegeman and Jamie Curtis, well, not Jamie Curtis, not yet anyway. Chris Stegeman was on meth, couldn't get off of it. And Matt Worley was on meth, he couldn't stay off of it. And Adam Garrett was on meth and couldn't stay off of it. Drake Chambers and Jason Vogt kept coming over, and I couldn't stand either one of those two. But all of them were smoking meth. I left Chapel, Nebraska because all my friends stopped being friends. They just cared about the drug. No matter their good intentions and pretty words, it's all complacency. When Matt Worley started stealing from his own mother, her tools, she was an auto mechanic, just so you know. When I say that my auto mechanic was a woman and she was damn good at her job, I meant it. Yes, my auto mechanic was a woman. Anyway, we'll get to Batman and his story. I left Chapel, Nebraska, went looking for my older brother. Found out he was staying in a suburb of Denver. So I went there. He wasn't staying there anymore. They'd kicked him out because there was a woman that Eric had a crush on that came over, and she looked very young. It's because she's short. She was legally old enough to be hanging out with my brother. And my brother at the time was 24, and she was 20 or 21. Anyway, that's not important with this story. What I was studying at the time was there was a lot of attacks against Israel from Palestine. And one of the things that was happening is suicide bombings. The double tap. Now, what is the double tap? Well, that's where one suicide bomber goes into a crowded place, a schoolyard or a marketplace or something like that. Now, they're not just after civilian targets, they want to get trained personnel. They want to get police officers and EMTs and people like that on the scene. As soon as the EMTs and police and paramedics and ambulance drivers and any doctors that might be there, firefighters, pretty much any first responder that shows up, that's when the second suicide bomber gets rid of themselves and anybody around. Now, Batman, that's what Sean went by. That's not his real name. It just the name that he went by was Batman. He was in the Marine Corps, and he was in Desert Storm in the 90s. And what he was telling me is that, well, while he was in Desert Storm, he wasn't actually fighting in Iraq. He was in Saudi Arabia, or in Kuwait. My bad. So while he was in Kuwait, one of the things that he was talking about is the suicide bombers. Like, you see them in the movies, and it's always somebody running at you real fast. In reality, it's just somebody standing in the crowd, and you see them walk through. They've got their backpack like anybody else would, or they got their purse like anybody else would. It's not like you see in the movies where it's somebody strapped up and sticking out like a sore thumb. There's no opportunity to stop the person because you don't know it's happening. But he had this idea. This is back before all the drugs really hit as heavy as they are now, because you're going to be hard pressed to find an American who's not on either street drugs, pharmaceuticals, alcohol, or all three. And drug addicts are not reliable. So there's really very few reliable Americans. But one thing that you can rely on is their dependency on drugs. For a lot of Americans, the idea that Batman had for the American double tap absolutely would work. See, here's how it would work in America. Here's what Batman said. He said, the first thing you do, you get yourself a meth addict and a rock the size of your fist, right? Now, you don't want him to get greedy, but you can take over the world with a rock the size of your fist. No joke. And here's how he said to do it. He said, you get one of those meth heads to deliver a backpack. All you're having him do is take a backpack somewhere and drop it off there. No problem. Now, you don't pay him first. You pay him afterwards because you want him to come back. And the first time, he might require some at first to go there and back. Now, you put just newspapers in there, something that's arbitrary. You send him on his merry little way. Backpack has got a lock on it, so he can't open it. And you've seen those, I'm sure. The travel backpacks, the ones you can't slice open with a razor knife or any of that, you can get them actually pretty cheap. You can get them like 12 of them for $14 each. And they're not very big. But really what you're doing is you're just teaching them to go drop stuff off. You're teaching them to be a hamster. If they drop it off without looking in the bag, great. You've got yourself a mule. If he takes the backpack and never returns, well, no problem. But this way, you don't run the risk of having somebody who's going to come back to your domicile, your place of work, your meeting place, wherever it happens to be. And you do it twice, just to test them out. If they'll go deliver a backpack full of newspapers or bricks or books or trash or water bottles or whatever, it doesn't matter what's in it. If they'll go deliver it, they're drug addicts. What they're thinking about is, how am I going to get more of these drugs? They're easy to manipulate, but I don't mess with drugs. So I'm not going to be anywhere on their upper echelon of important people. But that doesn't take away from the brilliance of Batman's idea. Because the point is, that backpack could have anything in it, literally anything in it. Once you know that they'll take it wherever you tell them to take it and drop it off there, that they're a loyal mule, you can literally put anything in there. That's the American double tap. How would you do that in a family oriented society? Let's say you're in Mexico. If you're in Mexico, chances are pretty good that your society is very family oriented. In Mexico, you would do it by targeting parents, and that does work here in America. But then you've got somebody who is afraid for their children, and they're going to be exhibiting a lot of signs of fear. A lot of signs of fear. They're also not likely to do what you want them to. They become a wild card at that point because a parent who's scared for their child is liable to do just about anything. They're not as predictable as you might believe. But when it comes to a drug addict or an alcoholic, yes, they're predictable. There was a delivery service down in Boulder for a while. Guy was trying to get his delivery service going, and well, most of his delivery people were drunks who rode their bikes everywhere. They rode their bikes everywhere to try to go somewhere that they could panhandle up enough money to get some alcohol, or, find some day work for long enough to get enough to buy some alcohol for a few days. And then they go park their bike and lay in the grass for a few days getting drunk until they get arrested for public intoxication and stupidity. And this guy thought, well, I always see these alcoholics on bikes. What if I gave them a 40 every time they deliver something for me? Well, here's what he found out. If you give them the 40 first, they're probably going to go lay in the grass and drink their 40 and forget all about it. Now, that's why picking the right addict, the right type of addict, is important. And that's why Batman chose a meth addict. According to him, if it's somebody who's on pharmaceuticals or mood stabilizers or muscle relaxants or alcohol or heroin, if it's any sort of a downer, they're not going to want to do anything. They're just going to want to lay there and be all up in their feels. But when it's something that's motivating, and when it's a drug that, here's what Batman said about meth, because he was a meth user. He said, here's the thing about meth. It's the only drug that you'll ever do that while you're doing it, you want more. He said, all the other drugs, when you're coming down from them, that's when you want some. When you're coming down from them, or once it's out of your system and your body is not used to sobriety, and it says, hey, you're not thinking the way you usually do. Something's weird, something's different. Yeah, something's weird and different. You're sober, and you can actually feel your anxiety now. It's not drank away. And even when you're drunk, it's still at the back of your mind. When you go to a society that's highly religious, you can infect zealots, people who have violent ideologies, or people who are quote unquote mentally ill. That's one thing that has been used in the Middle East, as well as in the Far East. Some of the suicide bombers they picked is you find somebody who's got a child that has Down syndrome or severe autism, but they're able to go places on their own, like to the market, things like that. And somebody will approach them. You know, you're in a community where everybody kind of sort of looks out for each other, and you would hope that they would. One example was there was a boy with Down syndrome, I believe, in the Philippines, and he was on his way to a market from his home, and he didn't have a backpack or any explosives or anything like that on him, but somehow made it to pretty close to the public market and just blew up. And it was something that wasn't really highly advertised here. One of those things that when it pops up, you gotta press the translate button and it translates it at a Russian or Farsi or, you know, some language that's not English. A lot of us tend to scroll past those. Another thing is, I've spoken about many of the suicide bombers and a lot of the rocketers from Palestine in the early to mid 90s, and then there was another rash of them from 2001 to 2009, I believe, pretty heavy. But one of the things that was found out demographically is that demographically it wasn't Palestinians that were doing many of these things. The men who chose to set up a mortar brigade, or a rocket brigade, sorry, in a schoolyard in Palestine, they found out that all of those men were from a place called Georgia. We're not talking about Georgia, United States. We're talking about a former, Russia used to be called the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And one of those was Georgia. One of them was, as we all know, Ukraine was one of them. When that guy wanted me to give him my engine design, make him one of my engines, and send it to him, the guy's name was Andrei Gagasian, and he wanted to use it for a war that was going to be fought between Azerbaijan and Georgia. And he was wanting to try to manipulate the fact that some of my ancestors were Jewish, to basically say that I'm on Israel's side, and that's not the case either. I'm on the side of peace. It's unfortunate that warmongers don't understand what peace actually means. Now, I had a lot of people that hopped on after Natalie was killed that said they were going to help, and then they ditched me over an assumed political ideology where they believed that I was on Palestine's side. And I also had people do the same thing because they assumed I was on Israel's side. I'm on the side of using your brain and looking at both sides. About actually putting yourself in someone else's shoes instead of rolling your eyes impatiently, waiting for someone else to finally shut up because only your opinion matters, only your decisions matter, only your understanding matters. Oh, yes, that feels good, doesn't it? I do have relatives, distant relatives in Israel. I also have distant relatives all over the world. I mean, I'm a Russian German of Hebrew descent for the most part, but I've got ancestors from every continent except for North America, and I believe South America too. I don't think I have any relatives from South America. My Aunt Mary was telling me there was a couple immigrants from South America that moved to the United States that were, 5 or 6 generations back, but they were European immigrants to South America before immigrating to the United States. As far as my ancestry goes, you know what? I see white people, right, walking down the street, and I have to be afraid of what one of them might think, and about what connections one of them might have that will make it so that they will be heard and that I won't. When I see a black person walking down the street, I see somebody who might understand, somebody who might be able to put themselves in my shoes. It puts me at ease because I grew up in the system with a lot of black kids, a lot of Asian kids, a lot of Hispanic kids. I grew up with Muslims, Jews, Christians, atheists. When Christians want to push their Jesus on me, and then they want to manipulate the words in that book for something that they ain't written for. It's not written for hate, neither is the Quran. I've read both. Jesus is mentioned in both. He did not teach hatred in either book. And just because he talked about things doesn't mean he was promoting them or saying that they were okay. In most of those situations, he was speaking out about how wrong it was to do such things. About how it wasn't their place. It's not your place to judge those people. It is God's place to judge them. If that is your belief and that's what you want to push on us as how we're supposed to treat you, many Christians want to use that, don't they? They want to say, you can't judge me. Only God can judge me. But then they want you to be judged. And they don't wait for God to do it, do they? I don't choose sides in religion. There's a right thing and a wrong thing to do. Whether the other person has black skin, white skin, red skin, blue skin. Whether they're a male or a female. That is your brother, that is your sister, that is another human being. If there is a loving God that created us all for a purpose, and that's what you want to push on me, that we have free will, then you have free will too. If your God put you here, and your God put a gay person here, and your God put a black person here, your God put men here, your God put women here, your God chose to do this for a reason. If that's what you want to push on me, that there is this all-loving, all-knowing God, I think Morgan Freeman said it best. There's a movie called Robin Hood, Men and Thieves. And there's a character in the movie. She's a little girl, and she asks Morgan Freeman's character, did God paint you? And Morgan Freeman says, for certain. And the girl asks him, why? And he said, because Allah loves wondrous variety. I made a speech on my YouTube channel that was used to pretend like I was some sort of a horrible person. Many of these professionals that I had gone to that have a set of laws that they have to follow, that wanted to tell me about giving it to a higher power, give it to the universe, give it to God, give it to Jesus. Many people did that. There's a part in the book where Jesus is talking about who will die. He's not saying to go kill any of those people, which is how many Christians like to reinterpret it. Jesus said that these people will die, so therefore that must be okay to... No, don't follow that through to your conclusion. That's not what he said. When I read that, you know what it occurred to? Right here, me, this guy right here. Do you know what occurred to me? According to Jesus, we're all going to die. Oh, well, I don't mean to be Captain Obvious here, but we are all going to die. That is a statement of fact. It's not a threat against someone's life. But then we see so many Christians use that portion of the Bible as an excuse to end lives throughout history. The entire history of Christianity has been near non-stop bloodshed in the name of Jesus, in Jesus' name, so on and so on and so on. The people who are the most Jesus-like, in my observation, are all atheists. None of them believe in your God. They believe in treating human beings the way that they want to be treated. Many of them do their best to treat fellow human beings the way that Jesus treated fellow human beings. I'm not talking about all the magic stuff. I'm talking about the sheer patience and the weight of humanity. I don't mean your everlasting souls. I mean the weight of humanity's expectations, people's expectations. Jesus, his example is serving his fellow humans. That's what he did. That is what is so glorious and powerful about that story. He is my favorite character of any book ever written, ever. But I'm not a Christian. I've read the book, and I've been to many churches. And what's in the book versus what's taught by the churches are not the same. Picking out bits and pieces that you can twist out of context. That's what you do with that book. You take a great book and a man who spoke of peace, generosity, and kindness, and you condemn him and you give him a black eye and a bloody nose by committing such horrible acts in his name, claiming that God wills it. No, he doesn't. That's not what the book was about. When I spoke about how wrong that was, made a video about how killing was wrong, about how according to the Bible, all of these people do in fact deserve to die. I even spoke about some of these people by name. Some of these people are actually serving time because of things that I claimed that they did. They got busted doing to other people. They got away with doing it to me by calling me mentally ill, but they got a big head and decided, oh, well, I can target anybody I want. That's where they messed up. They eventually slip up and somebody who's not called mentally ill goes, whoa, you messed up, young man or young woman. You messed up, Officer Waylon Lolatai. According to the Bible that these people wanted to throw in my face, people like Paulie Olson, according to their own book, according to the Jesus that they want to throw in my face, we all deserve to die. And when it goes through that part where he's explaining who deserves to die and why, when I spoke the things out of their own book, the things they wanted to manipulate as excuses not to do the good, honest, and righteous thing as Jesus would have done, what do? They go to the law, which is what they should have done to begin with when I first came to them. Instead of blowing me off and abusing their religion and the good name of Jesus, Jesus' good name, not just according to Christians, also according to Muslims. And we teach that all Muslims hate us and hate Jesus, and that is not the case. The Quran does not say that Jesus was an evil man. And the way the Christians use Jesus' words by just changing a few of them to fit however they choose, you get to see how me, saying the same things that Jesus did, explaining it, that was used to pretend that I was threatening to kill people that I was not threatening to kill. The fact that I spoke up about how wrong it is was manipulated by preventing me from showing evidence, preventing me from being allowed to face my accusers. Repeated threats and harassment and assaults. Like many of the people here wanting me to go to their friends at other agencies. It was the same thing with Paulie Olson. When I asked Paulie Olson why she wouldn't come forward, she said because some of the people at the sheriff's department were friends of hers. When I spoke up later on about how wrong that is, about how she is, in fact, and indeed a mandated reporter, her job description, not just the fact that in Nebraska everyone is a mandated reporter, but also her job description, with multiple positions within the county, requires her to come forward, requires it. But she wouldn't do it because she was friends with people in the Dual County Sheriff's Department. People that she knew I was trying to turn in because they didn't do their jobs as mandated reporters. Because they wouldn't do anything about Chris Kurth or Carl Snell. Later on, Leslie Snell. They wouldn't do anything about Clint Snell. I went to people when these situations happened and they didn't care. It was all, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sent to meth addicts who aren't going to help me, and that's supposed to be peer support. Well, you know what? In order for it to be peer support, it would have to be somebody who's autistic, like Claire. Claire would have been excellent peer support, except that she was being victimized because she's autistic and overwhelmed. The situations where she made time for me, no, it was not appropriate for her to do it the way that everyone else did. All right, I'll make time for you as long as it's while I'm having my downtime and either A, doing my drugs, or B, getting drunk. With Claire, she was getting drunk with that time. And it's not something that she did every night. That was literally the only time I ever saw her touch alcohol. But also, that was the one time that she was sort of quasi-able to make time for me. And the fact is, with what she was going through, I will absolutely make excuses for her because they're not just excuses. She is allowed one day of downtime. all of the days that she needed help. And if she didn't get this help, she wasn't going to be able to help me. Or she said to show up and she would help me. And when I showed up, she pawned me off on Casey. Or Casey wanted to keep on interrupting and making jokes about everything. I needed him to be quiet and take it seriously. And you get to hear how many people don't take it seriously. I don't take any stock in your religion. You show me your God by your actions. And when your actions don't meet your words, and your words are ever changing, not because you are overwhelmed and have communication disabilities, but because you believe if you talk over me, then you're in the right. That is not okay. I'm going to do something you may not agree with right now. I'm going to urinate in a bottle. Right now, being able to walk to a bathroom is not a possibility. I have issues because of abuse and assaults by police officers for stalking and killing a woman I did not stalk or kill. I'm told how I wanted it, needed it, chose it, and deserved it. My guilt is assumed because I am a man. You get to see how people who wanted help from me, how people promised that they would help me, and then, of course, it's always about them. And then, of course, when I speak up about the fact that no matter what, when they needed help, finding their friends, finding their loved ones, finding their families, I spoke up immediately. I posted up immediately. I took down the information that they wanted to tell because they knew their situation better than I do. But that's because it's their situation. With nearly all of you, you pretend that you know my situation better than I do. But you're not in it. And when I try to tell you my side, you roll your eyes, start talking over me, or you start using your bored voice. And you know what? That's the great thing about recording it. At least people can hear the tone of your voice when you say something that you don't actually mean. Your tone shows it.